All right, welcome back to the Adaptive Journey podcast. I'm Albert Wolfe from Adaptive Leaders, recording here from Guangzhou, China, and I'm delighted to invite and to have on the show Aditi Malik, our Managing Director at Adaptive Leaders for our India market. So Aditi, thanks for coming on the show. Where are you recording from today?
Thank you, Albert. I'm recording from New Delhi in India today. It's a nice, sultry afternoon in the northern part of the country. I'm not sure what the weather's like for you, but very, very excited to be with you after quite some time now. So looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I was just thinking that we should talk more for those listeners who don't know how our how our team works. So Aditi and I don't always work on the same projects. There are a few instances where I'll be coaching a leader in the same company in Guangzhou, and she'll have somebody in the same company in the India office. But I was just thinking we should talk more. The last time we were on a call, we were talking to an Indian brand there. Very well-known brand. We won't say who they are, but they were really interested in accelerating. So that's why they wanted to talk to us, is how do we accelerate, I think specifically onboarding for new hires. And so this is a sort of it's like a transition coaching topic, which is a big part of our work with senior leaders, but for everybody, for frontline staff. So that was a very interesting conversation. What's it like in India these days? Are people still interested in acceleration and speeding up?
I think that is a universal thing, Albert. And I think India even more so if you know and if you're familiar with how we Indians think, we're always wanting to be way ahead of the curve. So yes, there's always a need to accelerate. There's always a need to be uh, two steps ahead, if not four. And I think that sort of brings in some very interesting challenges. We're also seeing tremendous growth in the country from the perspective of different interests, different multinationals coming in. So the need for accelerating both at the entry levels, at the mid managers level, as well as senior leadership level, is all sort of really, really huge. The pace is very high. Change expectations are very high, and of course, the demands are very high as well. So there is no other way but for people to step on the gas and say, okay, we're ready to catch up on the speed and really make a difference in the organizations they're working with or the organizations that are coming in and really looking to India for tremendous support and growth from here.
Yeah, there's just so many directions I want to take this, and so many topics. Well, why don't we start with India in general? Because I was just looking at, if you put where I am, China, and India, where you are together, that's a big chunk of the world's population. And so, congratulations, India has overtaken China for most populous country. But I think everybody knows somebody from India. Everybody probably works with somebody from India, especially at the global company level, where a lot of our listeners will be from. What are some things that they should maybe know that they don't about India or working with Indians? Maybe just keep it at the
Mm.
personal level for now.
Yeah, very interesting question, Albert. Um, so I first of all, I don't know whether it's congratulation worthy to be the most populous country in the world. But for whatever it is worth, I think we do have a tremendous demographic dividend that we possibly can tap into. We're really at the cusp of a huge amount of talent, which is now ready and available in the country. So if I were to just sort of double click on specifically what's happening in India, I think from a growth, and growth can take different meanings, as you rightly pointed out. But if I were to just bring growth from a corporate perspective, uh, there is growth from the consumption side, because naturally, we are the most populous country, hence a lot of consumption. There's also growth from the perspective of interest of global companies to come into India and set up capability centers that really help them to tap into the talent and the knowledge base that we have. And we have tremendous knowledge base. And I think uh, that sort of really calls out the reason why we're in this really sweet spot per se. Also, if you've been watching the trends of the last few years, a lot of global companies are now being led by Indians, and that has much to say about our leadership capability as well. So, our the talent that gets exported out of India because they have been able to manage businesses in a country with, with the kind of dynamism that India has, it really positions them rather uniquely to be able to lead organizations globally. So the mindset and just their ability to lead, their ability, the mobility of the Indian talent is also something that really makes it very interesting for the way India is growing. So I think that's really on. I would think from all sides, and I'm not sure if that answers your question. Uh, but really, that's how I see growth in India from multiple lenses.
Yeah. What's the other side of that? How do the For example, we talk a lot about adaptivity and adaptive leadership, and especially through the lens of our three C's, curiosity, courage, and care. How is that necessary in India these days?
Um, I would like to believe, and this is based on my experience with organizations that we are constantly working with. Um, there is clearly a bigger need for leaders to start looking at the three C's more intentionally. Uh, some things happened by default, right? Because when organizations are growing, people are immediately getting placed in these positions. Uh, per force, they're expected to do some things. That doesn't necessarily mean that they build the muscle around, the intention of being curious at all times, being courageous at all times, and being caring at all times. So it really brings that into focus a lot more now, because the ask of people in India is that much higher, right? So we got away with. I'm probably going to be slightly political by making this statement, but we got away with being not as organized in the past. And what I mean by not being organized in terms of intentional about our leadership capabilities. And this is each one of us who's grown through the corporate ladders. Like, as I said, we just got into these positions, hence we did what we did and the roles demanded. Uh, but the ask now is a lot more different because the next generation that's coming into the workforce is asking for people, asking a lot more of their leaders, right? So from a trend perspective, you're seeing the need for leaders to be a lot more human centered, and I think that's where the three C's hence need to be a lot more intentionally developed by the leaders in the various positions. And I don't mean leaders simply as the top of the ladder, but really anybody who is in a position or is working with people really needs to have these three C's. They're absolutely eminent for them to develop these.
Yeah, and you mentioned something we talk a lot about in all of our work, which is everybody has great instincts. They would not
Mm.
be in the leadership position, whether it's middle leader, senior leader, they would not have made it there without these great instincts. But you also said more intentional. So they have to, now is the time to intentionally lean into curiosity, courage, or care in a more systematic, maybe a more proactive way.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I think see, a lot of people do move up, and I think we've heard this ever so many times, is that people get promoted for the knowledge that they bring, right? They've been great individual performers. That doesn't necessarily mean they become great leaders. Um, and I think that's the shift. Anybody who's really wanting to build a professional legacy needs to work on, right? And that's a mindset shift. Hence the intentionality, the need to lean into saying that, am I really curious? I mean, curiosity fundamentally, in any case, Albert, the world is moving so fast. If we're not going to be curious, there's only that much that we will be able to do. And, um, you know, going back into the growth story, and I talked about the knowledge base that we have, the talent that we have in India is because people are technically very sound. But, you know, if I'm not continuously abreast with what is happening, if I'm not continuously curious about making sense of what is happening in the world around me, I mean, we've been talking about VUCA and Bani as well for the longest time. Everything is not linear anymore. So I think the ability for people to really zoom out and to be able to make sense of disparate pieces of information is really much in demand now. So I think that becomes really, really important. In fact, I was just working with a bunch of leaders, and this has been a very interesting 3-month project that I have been on with them on their growth. So we divided the journey into 3 key pillars. So the first one was really about self-awareness and what their leadership brand is going to be. The second, milestone was about how they work with people, and not necessarily as a top-down, but just across. And the third piece, which was very interesting, was all about strategic thinking. And when we talked about strategic thinking, it was exactly about, do you know about things that are outside of your own work? And these are all technology leaders. They're actually running the technology for this very large organization, global organization. Um, but they ended up, or they tend to be a lot more, sort of focused on what they know, as opposed to being interested in what all the things that are happening outside. Now, if I'm writing the next great tech app, for instance, do I know what consumer trends are in other countries? Do I know how economies are playing out? Do I know what the geopolitics play has to do with the work that I do? And I think those are very, are pertinent questions that people have to start asking. And I think that's really the need to start to zoom out and become more and more curious, because everything is not going to be linear. There is so much to learn from everywhere and make sense of that information. So that's about curiosity. And of course, one has to be courageous to really be able to zoom out as well, because I think sometimes we're just so happy being where we are. Um, we don't necessarily put in the effort to say, oh, I really need to know other things as well, because after all, stepping into the unfamiliar is never comfortable for anybody. Yeah, so
Yeah,
those are my 2 interesting anecdotes.
I think just there's some really great tips in there. If you're a leader, if you're a listener right now and you're a leader of a team, you can do this is literally a 2-minute exercise. You can do a 3C team map. You can put the 3 words on the board and you can say, um, everybody go up and put a tick mark under the one that you think we're the strongest at as a team. Everybody goes up and they all check whatever it is. Caring. We all love each other. We love working with each other. Okay, good. Now we're going to do one more round. You can't pick the same one and go up and do one more. And then you see which one is coming out sort of or maybe 2 coming out on the weak side. And you might end up seeing that, oh, as a team, this is a low curiosity team. We're very maybe we're very bold and courageous. We're charging in a direction and we like each other. Our relationships are fine. But that direction has not been tested for a long time. And maybe we're going off a cliff. That would be
Yeah.
a low curiosity team map. And you can do this very quickly. You can revisit it as often as you want. And another tip I'd like to give is the program that Aditi is describing there exactly mirrors our adaptive leader journey, which we offer now online in the Adaptive Leader Studio, which is first is sort of self-awareness, self-leadership. Second is team leadership, which we call performance leadership. And then the third one is influential leadership, where she's talking about not just managing down, but actually managing across, managing up a little bit. The fourth piece, the strategic thinking, is not currently coming soon, but it's not in the studio soon. But it's also a wonderful team map. You can actually ask people. I've done it in a matter of minutes before. Which of these 3 domains, or 4 if you include strategic thinking, which one are you most interested in growing in? And it'll be curious, to ask that question. A little bit courageous, because what if they say something that you don't like, and you're showing care to them because you're actually pausing the work for the relationship. So there's just I
Mhm.
had to just translate some of that for our listeners.
Oh, thank you so much, Albert, for that. In fact, while you were speaking, I was thinking about this care piece, right, and doing the mapping. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but I've had this in a few times where we ask people about how they feel, about the team and the dynamics in the team. And everybody turns around and says, "Oh, we love each other. We're just such a great team. We're a very
Yeah.
caring team." And then the next question, they're like, "Oh, I really didn't know that about you." And it's very interesting how a lot of times we just start to assume because of the familiarity of being with people. And I think one of the things about caring, and I think I probably risk putting it out there, is that caring also comes in with the responsibility of calling out, making tough calls. And I think sometimes we just sort of start to interpret it to say, "Oh, we all just love each other." And I think the risk that comes in is ending up having, echo chambers getting created in teams. And that almost becomes counterintuitive to what we're talking about. So I think there has to be a lot of care in building care within the team, is how I'd like to put it. Yeah, I just thought I'll build on that thought.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. A useful framework I've used before is friendliness versus
Mm,
caring.
okay.
So I think a lot of times when you hear a team says we're very caring, we're very high trust or something, that's true. They do feel good. But sometimes it's just a general friendliness that we're polite and we're kind to each other, and we're not like that other work situation that was so hostile and toxic. We're better than
Mm,
that. But then if you really want to go deeper, you need to bring all three of those C's and say something courageous sometimes or be more curious sometimes as you're showing your care. So friendliness versus true deep care can be a useful, just for us coaches,
yes.
maybe not to say it quite like that to the
Yeah,
people.
absolutely. Yeah,
I was
absolutely. I think for leaders, it's just important to be, since we're talking about intentionality, I think just sort of being, keeping the center of their thought process as well.
I was just thinking about a trend in China. I wonder if you see this in India. I've noticed that everybody thinks their boss should have a coach, but nobody's saying that nobody's saying that they should have a coach. So, what is it like in India? Is there more of an openness to senior executives having executive coaches, or is that a new idea still, like it is in China?
Oh no, I think Indian leaders are pretty evolved, or those who are evolved are very happy to have coaches. But I think from a trend perspective, it's very similar to what you said, that everybody believes that their boss should have a coach and they don't need a coach, which is, and I don't know if that's a global phenomenon. I definitely know it's an Asian phenomenon. But yeah, it is pretty similar here as well.
I think I was just talking to somebody the other day about, you know, and he's this classic position that you just described, very skilled, technical, or individual performer, or even technical leader, now
Mm,
in charge of a whole business unit. And that's actually a very different job that he has not actually been proven to be good at. And he's doing the opposite. He's very open to, I need to learn, I need to grow these different skills. And and we actually talked about a former boss that he had, that he's really, he learned by negative example. Just do everything opposite of what that guy did. And then that's how to be a good leader. And so he realizes that's probably not enough information. But
mm,
what was really missing from his former boss was the three C's. And so he
mm,
he just gave an example, and this is another for those listeners out there who are worried or maybe reacting to a negative example. And and we even do this with parenting too, right? So it's don't do what happened to me. For those of you who are listening to, I don't want to be like that kind of a boss. Is very important to actually list specifically what are the things. And the funniest thing is he found that actually what he's doing right now is he's asking his people, what would you like? That simple question. What would you like? Instead of just assuming or giving or deciding or not giving. He was never asked that before. And I said, well, which of the three C's is that? And he said, after, thought about it for a moment, it's all three.
Yeah.
That one simple question. You have to be curious, but you have to be courageous. They might like something that you can't give them, and you're showing your care for them. And so that,
Mm.
you know, very specific exercise, what's different about what you're already doing, and run it through the three C's lens was very useful for him.
That's so helpful, Albert. In fact, I was just thinking when you were talking about it, is how beautifully that also segues into the Emma framework that we have. In terms of when we ask people what is it that they want. But I think a lot of times the leaders must also sit down to start to articulate what their expectations are, and really be able to have that bridge in terms of what is it that the organization needs, what is it that the leader is expecting, and is there alignment on that? And sort of tapping that expectations into the motivations of why people are showing up. Like we talked about when we were publishing the book on performance leadership, is really nobody's waking up to do a bad job at their place of work. So if they're not, do we know what is it that's really motivating them or to come or not come, right? There is something that's at play. And I think that again, sort of, if the leaders hold the three C's, there is this really valuable gold mine of information that is so available for them to encourage people to also become the best versions of themselves. And really, use the Emma framework to build that sustainability and um, the development of people, which I think sometimes leaders tend to miss. And I don't know if that's a trend in China, but I think we're almost waking up to smell the coffee in India to say, oh, I didn't know as a leader, it's my responsibility to make sure that my people become very successful. Um, which sort of a lot of these things sort of get sorted with both the three C's and the Emma kept in view. I'm curious to hear your thoughts around that and your experience.
Yeah, just briefly for listeners who may not be familiar with it, Emma is our performance leadership framework: expectations, motivation, measurements, and accountability. The sort of four keys to getting your team performing better. Everybody wants their team to perform better, but they don't know where to focus. So those are the four areas to focus in order. And Aditi is one of the main contributors to our book, Performance Leadership, available wherever books are sold. And you can see her name and her contributions in there, which is all about the Emma model. And I would agree. In China, um, there's definitely two camps. There's a sort of global companies who
Mm.
are thinking very differently and have you know, they bring their global perspective, and the leaders do have this idea that investing in the people succeeding is part of it. A Chinese company that is going global, there is a lot more focus. They're not totally unaware of that, but there's a lot more focus on hitting the numbers, on efficiency, on cranking out the really tremendous productivity that they've been able to bring to the market, and less, I would say, less attention on developing the people just for the sake of developing them. You almost have to prove your case. Now, how is this going to raise the raise the performance metrics that you have to connect it. Global companies, I think, already know that it does connect, but in China, there's a lot more skepticism about that right now. I don't know. What about India?
I agree that global companies know it, but I think the nuance comes in with the fact that who's at the helm of affairs, right?
Hmm.
So when we're in India and the leaders are Indian, uh, may or may not have exposure to the parent companies in other countries. There's a certain way, right? And of course, there's a social cultural play as well, which is the reason they do things that they way they do them. So that does not. I would like to think that that doesn't necessarily mean that they're focused on development of people. But as I said, one has to again be intentional because the ask of the leaders is now evolving as well. The next generation of the workforce is asking very different questions. wants to work very differently, which is challenging leaders a lot more and really actually asking them to do things that they possibly had never done before, right? So those are the kind of conversations, even in coaching conversations, that sort of starts to emerge a lot more prominently now, saying, I don't know why I have to explain. When my boss asked me to do something, I just did it. So, I don't understand why I have to answer so many questions, or why I should be, why is it my responsibility to make sure that they become successful? So I think those are good questions that are emerging. And um, I think it's just the belief that I have that when there are good questions, people will hopefully be, also become seekers to go out and find some good answers around them. So, so that's how I see the trends moving now.
Yeah. What are some of those things the new generation of employees is asking for? You
Mm.
sort of hinted at it. They want more justification, perhaps, or more rationale behind why decisions are made. That may be one of them.
Very clearly, I think the big ask of why are they doing what they're doing uh, is really, really big now. Um, what is the purpose of the organization? What is the purpose of that particular role? What is the purpose of doing the work that they're doing? And I think these are great questions for leaders to start articulating and putting out there as well. And I think it also ties back into the motivations piece as well from our MR framework, because people are only buying into the big purpose. Everybody wants to lead a meaningful life. So if they do, then it becomes really important to have an answer to that question. Um, I think some of the other, and again, I'm very curious from a China perspective, but what we are seeing in India now, for instance, is the whole remote working expectation. So lead me by objectives. You don't have to lead me by observation. I don't have to be in office every day for you to see that I'm really working. I also don't have to put in as many hours that you possibly did when you were younger, just to prove that I'm doing the work. And also because there are varied interests, right? So it's no longer work life balance. And it's very interesting. I picked up this phrase very recently, and it was life. So work doesn't have to become life. I have a life, and work is a small part of it. So I think just that conversation itself is becoming so different from what we are used to. So leaders have to be ready to sort of appeal to really getting these people motivated to show up. And I think that's also when we speak to leaders, you have all camps really, Albert, like it does with everything. But there's a whole bunch saying, "Oh my God, it's so hard to work with this generation,"
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh my God, it's so hard to work with this generation." So I think on both sides, the pain seems to be there. But really, it's really about taking a moment, taking a pause, and saying, "What is it that really motivates each set of people?" And we obviously don't want to generalize. Uh, but yeah, I think the expectations people have from their life is very different from what it used to be.
So, so just to clarify, are people talking about a life balance?
Well, I mean, that's a phrase. So they do say life, and they're saying work. So they don't say work and life, because it is really about life, and work hence is a tiny part of life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is also, yeah, this is seems to be a generational thing. Is it just always going to be like this? Is the next generation going to also struggle with this for the people they lead? Is a disconnect, right? The way they think about work and especially the motivators, especially the values that drive them. They're they're just list them out. There may be not a single one in common.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Expectations, you're right. Expectations are different, and because I mean, they're asking questions. Now, let's also see from a very Asian lens, right? My generation and maybe the one after me, we were never trained to ask questions. We were just, somebody said something because of it, extremely hierarchical. Whatever is said by somebody in authority, you just end up doing it. But I think the next generation is expecting it to be a lot more egalitarian, and they're just fine with asking a lot of questions. So if leaders are not comfortable answering questions or just letting those questions emerge, it sort of, leads to the sort of friction, um, which then needs some work, is how I look at it. But really, I don't think they're bad questions, and I don't think they're asking questions just for the sake of asking them. It's just that um, they're just saying, "Do you tell us? Give us a very good reason, and then we will go out and do whatever is required." And also that, it's not always about the way you've done it is the best way of doing it. There could be a lot more efficient ways of doing it. So, for example, the reliance on AI in itself is a big thing now. Emails get written by with AI, and text messages have emoticons on it, which the older generations are finding hard to wrap their heads around. So I think it's just a way of working which is shifting. And you're right, because the way of working is shifting is because they value different things, and because they expect different things from their work and from their life. Hence, different things motivate them. I think, and those are, in my mind, again, a very good set of questions for leaders to start asking out of that the curiosity that they really need to bring in. I mean, we are talking about reverse mentoring, for instance, as well, right? So we're saying that are the Gen Zs now going to be reverse mentoring because we don't understand their language, we don't understand their lingo, we don't understand what they expect. And I think that's a great way to really build a way more collaborative workplace than have it always hierarchical, really.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think encouragement I want to give our listeners is if you are, there's just two sides to this. If you are leading somebody that is just driving you crazy because of maybe it's all the questions they ask or just the way they think about work, how should you think about that? So you could think of it as just, I can't wait to get rid of this person, or you could think of it as a kind of wind. Now, if you're standing still in a very strong wind, it's a lot of pressure to fight that, and you're just so tired of getting hit in the face with this. But if you happen to have a sailboat nearby, that if you could just harness that wind and it will just keep going. And so there's a tremendous amount of energy in the new generation, but you have to get your sail in the right place, and then you might be surprised at what they can accomplish, but you can't fight it. It's basically it's a losing battle to try to fight, or because we've seen it again and again. They'll just leave. They'll just go to another company where they find it could be half the salary, but they find more meaning in the work. And so I guess the question for the leader listening who's being driven crazy by that is, are you curious what it might look like to harness that energy instead of just being totally annoyed by it? What would you say to that? But then we'll switch to talk about if you are that person.
Oh no, I just completely love the metaphor that you used, Albert, out there. It is really about harnessing the wind. I think that's so powerful.
Yeah, so you'll need the three C's to do it. You'll need curiosity about what's really driving this. You'll need courage to actually pause what feels like a waste of time to deal with this person that keeps being a problem, and care for the other person that this actually is the stepping stone for a better workplace for them and for you, because you won't have to have the same sorts of frustrating discussions all the time. Now, if you are that person and you may not be aware of how different your boss is thinking, we're going back to Aditi's workshop series, part one, the self-awareness part. You might be a thorn in the side of your boss because of the way that you think about, whatever it is. You'd rather leave work on time and never get overtime pay than finish, this project today. And that makes no sense to them. When I was your age, we would have stayed until midnight to finish this. Whatever it is, the way that you're thinking about work is really different than your boss. You also need the three C's. You actually need to be curious about what it is like to look at work from your boss's perspective. And I guarantee you, no matter how much friction you've had with this supervisor, to ask a genuine, curious question about the way they think, what makes them tick, the way things were when they were your age, working in the workplace, 99% of them will be happy to engage on that topic. You have to pick your timing, but you also need to kind of, don't give up your standards, your quest for meaning or whatever it is. But you also need to expand your view of what work looks like so you can collaborate better. What would you add to that? What other advice if you are that younger generation?
Oh, well, I think I would like to believe that they're already very curious because they're asking a lot of questions. I think what they really need to double click on is care. I
Okay.
don't think they're falling short of courage either. Uh, so I think there has to be much care upwards as well. I think again because of the kind of hierarchical, environments or cultures that we've lived in, care tends to flow downward more often than not, or that's the expectation. Uh, but very early on in my career, I learned, I remember this one time when a colleague of mine, and he says, your boss is looking for motivation. He also needs to be motivated sometimes. So you need to motivate upwards. And I was like, oh, I never thought of it like that. I thought that it was his job to motivate me. But I have never lost sight of that bit of advice because care has to flow in all directions. So if whatever level you're at, I think it's really important to have care flow up as well, or sideways or downwards, whichever direction. Really.
I love it. What did you do? How did you send care upwards?
Oh well, I'm not sure I sent care upwards, but I definitely motivated, and I sat down and had went out for a coffee and had a great conversation in terms of his great deck that he'd made. And in fact, this particular boss of mine and I have still continued to be in touch. It's very interesting. He lives in Singapore now, and I actually invited him to address one of my workshop groups the other day to just talk to them about the way he tells stories because he's just a great storyteller. And my anecdote to him is that he can actually go out and sell a desert to a thirsty person. So much to learn, right? So I think even though we don't work together, we haven't worked together for the last 20 odd years, but I think I do hope I'm still motivating him in some ways, right? So there's sort of acknowledgement of just the
Yeah.
value that he created and continues to create in the world around.
Does not occur to people to do that for their supervisors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just always a lot of give it to me kind of a thing as opposed to offering it up as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, Aditi, this has been wonderful. This has been fascinating. I feel like we should do about 4 or 5 more episodes with you just to keep the conversation going. Maybe I'll just end with a sort of a standard question on the show about the 3 C's for you in this season that you're in. Which of the 3 C's, curiosity, courage, or care, are you focusing on more for yourself right now?
Well, it's almost like you're putting me on a spot by asking me choose one of the three, but I would think
I
it's
am. I
all
am.
three. No, I'm steering away from it, Albert. I would think it's all three because every situation really demands a different C to sort of be dialed up. Uh, but I would at no point in time think that there's any one. Every single time there's just something different. So it's really always being aware that I have to work with all three C's in place. Um, is really the mindfulness work that I continue to do as a coach, as a facilitator. And I think that's really important. I mean, I would, for example, sometimes just tap myself on the back and say, "Oh, I'm just intrinsically very curious." But I also know that a lot of times I do tend to become taken in by my own biases and my own beliefs, and that comes in the way of my curiosity. So it's very dangerous to ever say I'm good at one of the three, or there's one that I want to focus on. Uh, but yeah, it's always work in progress.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. For me today, maybe I should say, it was care. Did I was at home and it was a crazy, I could hear through my office door something crazy was going out there. And normally I would charge in and try to solve it or try to talk to people, ask what's going on. I just didn't ask any of those things. I just gave some hugs and said, I think you guys are having a hard day. And it's summer break over here, so the kids are home. And that was actually a very different approach than I normally take. So it was I did it with the 3 C's in mind. Which of these would I not normally use? Let's try that one.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. If so, given your anecdote, then I think I would choose on the courage for today and just for this particular recording. Very unlike me to not have, gone through a lot of prep and to show up. That's not very me. But just as we were catching up before the recording, that today I was going to go with the flow. So yeah, I think a little more courage.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Aditi. This has been wonderful. Was so happy to have you on the show. And I wish I was coming out to visit you soon, but I know one of our other coaches will be in India soon. So we'll see you next time.
Yes, Albert, and I look forward to having you in India at some point in time. Thank you for this lovely conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Um, and to your point on 4 or 5, I think our listeners will get a little bored if they see me too often. So we'll probably space it out. But thank you so much for
Okay.
this lovely conversation. Uh,
Okay. Thank you, Aditi. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.